Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, cool. Okay, ready. Hi, my name is Ishmael Mendoza. I'm an SPH undergrad senior, and I will be presenting research I did through the undergrad or Urban Policy Public Policy Fellowship under UIC's Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement. And the topic of my research was on health equity and how to improve it in relation to the Latino community in regards to census and health surveillance systems. So really this issue comes down to two key factors of creating more capacity within health systems and the census to disaggregate the data for the Latino population into ethnic subgroups. And then the second factor is also mistrust within the Latino community itself against the census and other data collecting institutions. And the key policy focus of my research was the current Federal Register notice open right now to propose adjustments to the way that we define race and ethnicity in the census. So this Federal Register notice is open right now and open to public comment, open for 8 more days. And some motivations behind this project and why I took this approach is because the benefits of disaggregated data, especially based on disaggregating by ethnic subgroups, is very well documented, especially for the Hispanic Latino community, where as one example in table 1, if you disaggregate the Hispanic Latino community into its ethnic subgroups for HIV-related mortality, you see a widespread of different outcomes among the different communities. And the second figure is really trying to portray why this shift towards more disaggregated ethnicity data is truly necessary, because we've seen a trend in diversifying Latino population in the US, and this trend is expected to continue. So to address the two issues of capacity of data as well as mistrust, some of the things I did in this project was a literature review on the disaggregated data in practice and research, as well as in health surveys that is used for Hispanic Latino community, as well as assessing the mistrust of the 2020 census within the Latino community. And finally, analyzing the current sentiments of the comments posted on the Federal Register notice so far. Some limitations I want to note is that Hispanic Latino community is just one racial or complex race topic in the up for grabs in the current initial proposals. Others include American descendants of slavery, the MENA identifier, as well as multiracial identification, as well as more. So, but for this project, I'm mainly focusing on how it relates to the Latino population. So to provide a little more background, the significance of the census, it impacts 6 key areas of apportionment, redistricting, funding allocation, as well as planning, emergency response, as we saw with COVID, as well as serving as a statistical base for other federal surveys, such as the American Community Survey. And acknowledging how the wide-reaching impacts of the census, it's alarming that in 2020, there was a significant undercount in the Hispanic Latino population. It's important to acknowledge that the Latino population has been historically undercounted in the census, but when looking according to the US Census Bureau's post-enumeration survey, there was a highlighted increase in the counting error between how effectively we were able to count the population compared to 2010. And this was significant for the Hispanic Latino population. So to provide a little more background on the history and timeline of how Hispanic Latino population has been identified in the census, we go back to 1930, and that was the first identifier introduced of Mexican to try to capture this population through the census. And previously, they were just categorized as white. In 1940, this indicator was actually removed from lobbying by Mexican Americans with the help of the Mexican government, because they feared that this identification actually hurt the community more by increasing the risk of deportation and stripping them of the privileges that the identifier of white previously gave them. So they chose to return to the identification of white. But 1954 and 1956, we see 1964, we see the implementation of policies that do offer these protections that were previously lacking through Title Code US 13, which enshrined confidentiality of census data, and the Civil Rights Act Title VI, which enshrined anti-discrimination from federally funded systems. And 1997 is where we see the current standing of how we define race and ethnicity in the census, which is relatively recent. And we haven't really had changes in how we define those standards since then. But in 2015 and today, we are seeing the potential to make progress and change to better identify how identities relate or describe themselves and how we can capture them better in data. And in parallel, there's a timeline of progression of the importance of data disaggregation and research. So the goal of data disaggregation is really to shine light on data inequity and make populations that are underrepresented in data more visible. So to my findings section on literature review, the first thing I want to point out is this study that went over the decade of 2006 to 2016, looking at disaggregation for the Latino population in health surveillance as well as health systems. And they found that only 9.7% of articles covering this population in that time period disaggregated by ethnic subgroup, as seen in figure 2. In green, ethnic disaggregation is one of the smaller methods of disaggregation for this population, despite its benefits. And in addition to that, only 18 out of the 45 surveillance health surveys that they found were able to provide that capacity to actually do this disaggregation by ethnicity. So I think it's important to realize that the barriers that contribute to this include the concerns over data privacy and political strength, as well as these other ones listed by Cater et al. Another important note is that so the mistrust is in this study by the Urban Health Institute, we see that mistrust is consistently higher among the Hispanic Latino community, as well as in relation to citizenship status and nativity in the bottom graph as well. And some highlights from the current Federal Register notice that I wanted to note include considerations. We are seeing need to and want among communities to have better defined ethno-racial categories that better suit who they feel they are, as well as still concerns about losing intersectional identities such as Afro-Latino if we combine Hispanic race and ethnicity into the same question. Some highlights of the comments include separation, sorry, okay, all good.
Thank you.
Thank you.